It's tough to say when things started falling apart. At first, it was just this faint, nagging feeling, like something was off but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but as the days went by, that uneasy feeling grew, gnawing at me from the inside. I couldn't ignore it anymore. It began with the little things. Small changes in Emily, my wife, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone. She started pulling away. Our conversations grew shorter, and the silence between us stretched longer, heavier. She began coming home late, her usual bubbly self replaced by a distracted, almost aloof demeanor. It was as if I'd suddenly become invisible in my own marriage. And then came the excuses. "I've got extra work to do, honey," she'd text, letting me know she'd be staying late at the office again. At first, I believed her. I had to. What else could I do? But then I started noticing other things that didn't sit right. Her phone, for one. Emily used to be so casual with it, leaving it lying around without a care. I could glance at it and she wouldn't think twice. But now, she clung to that thing like it was a lifeline. The moment I walked into a room, her screen would go dark. If I dared to ask what she was looking at, she'd deflect with lightning speed, changing the subject so fast it made my head spin. One night, everything came to a head. I'd had a long day at work and was looking forward to a quiet evening. But when I walked through the door, there she was, standing in the living room, phone in hand. Her face gave her away. A fleeting look of panic crossed her features before she quickly shoved the phone behind her back, like a kid caught sneaking cookies. "Emily," I said, my voice low but sharp, "what's going on?" She laughed nervously, a forced, hollow sound. "Nothing, Michael. Just work stuff." I didn't believe her. Not for a second. Something inside me snapped. My gut screamed at me to push, to find out the truth. "Let me see your phone," I demanded. Her eyes darted around, the panic unmistakable now. "Why?" she shot back, her voice defensive. "Too quick." "Emily," I said again, firmer this time, stepping closer. "Let me see it." Reluctantly, she handed it over, her hand trembling. Mine shook too as I unlocked it. And then, there it was, the gut punch that knocked the wind out of me. At the top of her messages were texts between her and her boss, Ethan Caldwell. "Let's meet up after work," one said. "I need your input on something personal," read another. "I'll be waiting for you. Same time, same place." No explicit details, but the meaning was glaringly obvious. This wasn't about work. This wasn't some innocent business discussion. I stared at the screen, my head spinning. The room felt suffocating, like all the air had been sucked out of it. My hands went numb. I couldn't even look at her. "Emily?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "Is this what I think it is?" She didn't move at first, frozen like a deer caught in headlights. Then, with a shaky breath, she said it. "Yes, Michael. I've been seeing Ethan for a while now." Her words didn't make sense, like a foreign language I couldn't understand. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation. But what was there to say? She'd already confessed. "Why?" I managed to choke out. "Why him? Why Ethan?" Her eyes wouldn't meet mine. "He's successful, Michael. Powerful. He has everything I've ever wanted. Everything you can't give me," she said, her voice low but steady. "He sees me, really sees me. He makes me feel wanted, like I'm more than just a housewife." The words hit me like daggers. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My heart screamed at me to make her understand, to show her how wrong she was, how much she was destroying. But I was numb, drowning in the weight of her betrayal. "Emily," I said, my voice breaking, "you've ruined us. You've ruined everything." She didn't argue, didn't fight back. She just stood there, hollow-eyed, like she already knew there was no fixing this. The days that followed were a haze of anger and silence. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how it had all gone so wrong. How could she do this to me, to us? How could she throw away everything we'd built? For him. Ethan Caldwell. He was everything I wasn't. Ambitious, wealthy, driven. I couldn't stop comparing myself to him. Was I just someone she'd grown bored of? But as the hurt festered, something new started bubbling up inside me. Revenge. I wasn't going to let this slide. Not a chance. I started watching Ethan, learning everything I could about him. His routines, his habits, his weaknesses. The man lived for power and attention, thriving on the thrill of his success. But nobody's invincible. That's when I turned to Lily, one of Emily's co-workers. Unlike Emily, Lily was kind, sharp, and perceptive. She hadn't fallen for Ethan's charms and, to my surprise, she already suspected what was going on. Lily became the one person I could talk to, the one person who didn't treat me like a fool. And with her help, I began planning. Lily had her suspicions about Ethan's motives with Emily, and though she tried to stay neutral, I could see the sympathy in her eyes when she looked at me. "Michael, you deserve better," she told me one evening after I'd vented for what felt like hours. "But I don't think Emily sees that right now. She's caught up in the excitement of Ethan's world." "I'm going to make her see it," I said, my voice low and bitter in a way I'd never felt before. "And I'm going to make Ethan pay for this." Lily didn't say anything right away, just nodded slowly like she was choosing her words carefully. "Just be careful, Michael. You're not dealing with someone who plays fair." But by then I was already too far gone. Revenge was planted firmly in my mind. I was going to bring Ethan down and make him regret ever touching my wife. And Emily? She'd feel all the pain she'd put me through. Once I let the weight of Emily's betrayal sink in, I knew I couldn't let it slide. I couldn't let her and Ethan think they could walk away from this without consequences. I wasn't just going to sit in my pain, I was going to make them regret it. But if I wanted to hurt them, I needed a plan. Revenge wasn't about petty or impulsive moves. It had to be calculated, deliberate, and precise. The first step was to get closer to Ethan. I didn't have the connections to approach him right away, but I knew enough about how he thought. His ego was massive, and he thrived on compliments. Even more importantly, Emily had mentioned more than once how much he loved new business opportunities. Ethan was obsessed with growth and new challenges, always needing to keep himself stimulated. I knew that was my way in, so I started working on a proposal, something that would be impossible for him to resist. I reached out to some old acquaintances with connections in the business world, and they were happy to help. In a few days, I had the foundation for an idea that would catch Ethan's attention. It was a business expansion proposal, a way for him to enter untapped markets, a golden opportunity for a man like him. I spent weeks perfecting every detail. It had to be airtight. I needed it to look impressive enough that Ethan wouldn't even think about turning it down. Finally, I sent it to him under the name of a supposed new business contact looking to collaborate. I made sure everything about it looked professional and polished, not something he could dismiss as amateur. This had to look like the kind of partnership he couldn't afford to ignore. It didn't take long to get a response. Ethan was interested. He wanted to meet. Meeting Ethan in person was my next step, and I knew I couldn't afford to screw it up. I'd done my homework on him. He admired confidence, ambition, and people who could talk business like pros. The meeting was set for a high-end bar downtown, one of those exclusive spots where the powerful went to unwind after making their deals. When I walked in, I saw him immediately. He was sitting in a corner, drink in hand, exuding confidence. Just like I'd imagined, he was the kind of man who made everyone else in the room feel smaller. I walked over and shook his hand. "Ethan," I said with a steady smile. "It's a pleasure." He shook my hand firmly and smiled back. "Michael, I've heard good things about you. Let's talk business." The conversation went smoothly, maybe too smoothly. I had anticipated his questions and came prepared with all the answers. I laid out the proposal, explaining how it would help him expand into new markets and grow his influence. I could tell he was impressed by the way his eyes lit up when I talked about the potential opportunities. By the end of the meeting, I had him. Ethan was interested, and this was just the beginning. We agreed to discuss things further. It was the start of a longer process, but I knew I was in. Now I just had to keep his attention and prove I could be valuable. Maybe even more valuable than Emily had ever been to him. But taking down Ethan's career wasn't enough. I wanted to hit him where it hurt most, his personal life. That's where his wife, Samantha, came into the picture. I started digging deeper into Ethan's private life, looking for cracks in his seemingly perfect image. It didn't take long to find something. One of his employees, Thomas, was particularly talkative. I ran into him at a networking event, and after a few drinks, he was more than willing to share. Ethan's wife, Thomas said with a knowing smirk. She's miserable. The guy barely pays her any attention. She's been holding out, hoping he'll change, but he's too focused on himself to even notice. Thomas didn't stop there. He hinted at the strain in their marriage, how Samantha had grown increasingly distant, but still clung to the hope that Ethan might finally prioritize her. She's lonely, he said almost matter-of-factly. You can see it. She's holding on by a thread. That was all I needed. Samantha's vulnerability was the opening I'd been looking for, but I couldn't just walk up to her and start asking about her marriage. I had to be subtle. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Ethan threw a lavish party at one of his properties, inviting the business elite, their spouses, and a few select others. I knew Samantha would be there, just like I knew she'd be miserable. Every time I'd seen her at these events, she was standing off to the side, ignored by her husband. This time I'd make sure we spoke. I noticed her as soon as I walked in. She was sitting alone at a table, her drink untouched as she stared off into the distance, lost in thought. The sadness in her eyes was unmistakable, the weight of neglect written across her face. This was my moment. I approached her with a warm smile, sliding into the seat next to her. Samantha, right? I asked, keeping my tone light and conversational. How have you been? She glanced up, startled at first, but her expression softened when she realized it was me. Oh, hi, she said, her voice uncertain. It's been fine, I guess. I leaned in just slightly, speaking with gentle concern. You seem a little off tonight. Is everything okay? She sighed deeply, her shoulders slumping under the invisible weight she carried. I don't know, she admitted. Lately, everything just feels so empty. Ethan's always busy. I barely see him anymore. Sometimes, I wonder if he even cares. That was all I needed. Her words poured out like water from a broken dam. Frustrations, heartache, anger at a man who had promised her the world, but had left her stranded in it alone. It was clear she needed someone to notice her, to listen, to make her feel wanted again. As the conversation unfolded, I became the person she needed. I gave her my full attention, made her feel understood, as if I were the only one who really saw her. It wasn't hard to earn her trust. In fact, it was shockingly easy. I knew exactly what to say, how to respond, and she opened up to me with surprising ease. Samantha was desperate for a connection, and I was happy to step into that role. The longer we talked, the more confident I felt that my plan was working. She kept talking, revealing more of herself, while I listened intently, carefully. Ethan, as I expected, was nowhere to be found. I didn't push her for anything, not yet. This was just the beginning. I'd planted the seed, worked my way into her thoughts. Soon I would make her feel something new, something she hadn't felt in years. The first step was done. Now it was time to take things further. Over the next few weeks, our meetings became more frequent. At first, it was casual, small talk at events, fleeting moments where I played the role of the listener she desperately needed. I showed interest, made her feel seen, something Ethan hadn't bothered to do in years. With each encounter, she let me in a little more. She shared her unhappiness, her loneliness, her frustrations with a husband who had left her feeling invisible. I listened carefully, never rushing, always validating her feelings. I became the person she could rely on. A coffee here, a quiet lunch there. Nothing too obvious, but enough to build a bond. With each conversation, her defenses crumbled, bit by bit, until there was almost nothing left. At first, I thought about keeping things slow, maintaining the illusion of innocence. But the more time I spent with her, the more I saw how desperate she was, not just for connection, but for someone to truly care. I was ready to be that someone. It wasn't long before our meetings escalated. A walk in the park turned into dinners at quiet, dimly lit restaurants. I watched how she began to relax around me, how she seemed to come alive in my presence. Samantha had been deprived of affection for so long, and I knew exactly how to fill that void. Then came the evening when everything changed. We were walking along a quiet path after one of our long conversations. The air felt charged, thick with an unspoken tension. The fading light of the evening cast soft shadows on her face, and for a moment, I couldn't look away. I stopped suddenly, turning to face her. Her eyes met mine, filled with curiosity and something deeper. Her voice was soft, almost trembling. "Michael, what is it? Why are you looking at me like that?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest. Without another word, I leaned in and kissed her. The kiss wasn't hesitant or gentle. It was deliberate, filled with the anger and hurt I had carried for so long. For a moment, she froze, and I thought I had gone too far. But then, something shifted. She kissed me back. The kiss deepened, and I could feel the excitement coursing through her. This was new for her, thrilling in a way she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in ages, she was feeling alive again, experiencing the closeness she had been denied for so long. I could see it in her eyes, in the way her breathing quickened. This wasn't just a kiss. It was a release of everything she had kept locked away. When we finally pulled apart, her face was flushed, her breath uneven. She looked at me with a mix of surprise and something else. Something softer, almost tender. I didn't expect that," she whispered, her voice unsteady. I smiled gently, keeping my tone calm. "Neither did I replied. "But it felt right." She didn't respond immediately. I could see the conflict in her expression, the struggle between loyalty to Ethan and the connection she felt with me. I knew what she was thinking, and I knew exactly how to keep her on the edge. It was the perfect position to be in. From that moment, our meetings took on a new intensity. We both knew something had changed. What began as an innocent connection had morphed into something far more dangerous, and Samantha didn't seem to mind. If anything, she craved it. A few days later, we met again, this time at a quiet hotel on the outskirts of the city. The hour was late, and the restaurant inside was nearly deserted. We sat across from each other, barely speaking, the silence thick with anticipation. I could tell she was nervous. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her glass, but there was something else in her eyes, a readiness, a desire for something more. I reached out and took her hand gently, leading her upstairs to the room. She followed without hesitation, and when the door clicked shut behind us, no words were necessary. The tension between us broke like a dam, and we were in each other's arms, more passionate than ever. That night was the first time we were together, the first time I used her, knowing full well she believed this could be the start of something real. But I wasn't in this for her. I wasn't here to love Samantha. I was here to use her, to take her vulnerability and turn it into a weapon against Ethan. To me, she wasn't just a pawn. She was the key to delivering the kind of pain Ethan had inflicted on me when I discovered his affair with Emily. Samantha would be the instrument of my revenge. As we lay there afterward, her head resting on my chest, her fingers tracing idle patterns across my skin, I couldn't ignore the irony. She thought she'd found something new, something meaningful. To me, it was simply another step in the plan. The game was underway and I intended to win. Meanwhile, back at home, Emily was beginning to change. She had grown colder, more distant, as if she could sense the shift but couldn't quite put her finger on it. It wasn't hard to guess why. She'd started growing suspicious. Couldn't blame her. I'd been spending more time away, dedicating myself to meetings with Ethan and working my way into his circle. One evening, after I returned home late, I found Emily waiting in the living room. She sat with her arms crossed, her eyes sharp and accusing. "Where were you tonight, Michael?" she asked, her tone biting. I tried to stay calm, giving her the same excuses I'd used before. "I was working, Emily. You know that." She stood, her expression hardening. "Don't lie to me," she said, her voice low but firm. "I know something's going on. I've been following you." The words hit me like a punch. My heart raced as I struggled to keep my composure. What do you mean, following me? Her eyes narrowed. Don't play dumb. I've seen the way you've been acting, disappearing, lying. You think I don't notice? You're having an affair, aren't you? For a split second, I caught a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She wasn't entirely sure, but the paranoia was settling in. I had to tread carefully. If she uncovered the truth too soon, everything I'd built so far would collapse. I smiled calmly, keeping my tone even. You're imagining things, Emily. There's nothing going on. But I knew it was only a matter of time before she uncovered more. It didn't matter, though. I was already playing a much bigger game. As the days passed, I could feel my plan falling into place. There was a dark satisfaction in watching Ethan's empire slowly start to crack, even if it was subtle at first. My influence within his circle was growing, and with it came opportunities to undermine him in ways he'd never see coming. I started by planting seeds of doubt about his leadership. At first, it was nothing overt, just casual comments during conversations with the right people. Stakeholders, investors, even some of his employees. He's been distracted lately, I'd say, spending more time on personal matters than on strategy. It's affecting his decisions. I didn't need to fabricate outright lies. The truth, framed just the right way, was enough. Slowly but surely, the cracks began to show. Ethan's colleagues were quick to confirm the narrative. Some had been disgruntled for years, frustrated by his domineering leadership style. Others were eager to gossip, thrilled to hear someone else echo their own doubts. It wasn't long before deals that once seemed effortless became difficult to secure. Whispers among employees grew louder, loyalty eroding bit by bit. I had sown the seeds of discord, and now I watched as they began to sprout. But I wasn't done yet. My focus shifted to gathering evidence, proof that could destroy Ethan completely. To bring him down, I needed more than rumors. I needed hard facts, something that would dismantle both his personal life and his business empire. The cracks in his foundation were growing, but I wasn't going to stop until the entire structure came crashing down. I needed something concrete. That's where Lily came in. She had become my inside source at Emily's workplace, and I had started to rely on her for valuable information. She had always been close to Emily, so I figured she could give me the inside scoop on what was happening behind the scenes. When I asked Lily about Ethan and Emily's relationship at work, she was hesitant at first, careful not to share too much. But after a few conversations, she began to open up. She told me their affair had caused quite a stir at the office. Colleagues were gossiping, making snide comments about their special relationship. It wasn't a secret anymore, and the tension in the workplace was palpable. But what really caught my attention were the rumors about Ethan's shady business dealings. Lily mentioned whispers about questionable deals, transactions that didn't add up, unaccounted for expenses, and suspicious contracts. These could be exactly what I needed to finally bring Ethan down, not just in the eyes of his colleagues but in the eyes of the law. I didn't waste any time. I dug deeper, pulling in more information from Lily and others who worked closely with Ethan. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how many weaknesses he had, how much dirt I could dig up. I wasn't in a rush, the evidence would come together in time, but knowing I was already a step ahead gave me a sense of control. At home, things were getting increasingly tense. Emily had started to notice my behavior shifting, and her suspicions were growing by the day. The changes weren't huge, but they were becoming too obvious for her to ignore. I was spending more time away from home, but it wasn't just that. My phone buzzed with messages late into the night, and I was growing distant, physically and emotionally. Emily was beginning to sense something was off. One evening, as I walked in late after another long day with Samantha, Emily confronted me. She was sitting in the living room, her arms crossed and her expression sharp. "Michael, what's going on with you?" she asked, her voice tight with frustration. "Where have you been?" I kept my face neutral, doing my best to stay calm under her scrutiny. "I've been working, Emily. You know that." She stood, her voice rising with anger. "No, it's not just that. You've been so distant lately, so cold. I don't know what's going on with you, but it's driving me crazy." My pulse quickened. I knew she was getting closer to the truth, but I wasn't about to let her figure it out. "You're overthinking it, Emily," I said calmly, keeping my tone steady. "I'm just focused on the things I need to get done." Her glare lingered, suspicion etched across her face. But I knew she wouldn't push too hard, not yet. Her own guilt over her affair with Ethan was holding her back. She was so wrapped up in her lies that she couldn't untangle mine. I let the conversation end there, but I could see the cracks starting to form. She was questioning things, but she didn't have the full picture. As long as I kept my cool, I could keep her in the dark. Meanwhile, Ethan was beginning to crack under the pressure. It wasn't just his business dealings that were unraveling. His personal life was falling apart, too. The rumors about his leadership were spreading, and they were starting to take a toll. Ethan was becoming paranoid, and it showed. At meetings, he was erratic and unpredictable. He snapped at employees, losing his temper over trivial issues. His once loyal colleagues were beginning to question him. At the same time, my relationship with Samantha was growing deeper. I could see that she was developing real feelings for me, convinced that our connection meant something meaningful. I let her believe it. Samantha had started sharing more of her frustrations and loneliness during our time together. She wanted to feel wanted, to feel loved, and I was more than willing to give her that illusion. But to me, she was still just a pawn. I couldn't afford to let emotions complicate things. Samantha was the tool I needed to take Ethan down, and I couldn't let myself forget that. Even so, I couldn't ignore how much control I had over everything. Ethan's business, Samantha's emotions, Emily's suspicions. It all revolved around me, and the power was intoxicating. But I also knew the risks. Ethan's colleagues were starting to take notice of me, whispering about my growing presence in his circle. They didn't know my true intentions yet, but I could sense their curiosity. It was only a matter of time before they started digging. Still, I was too far ahead for anyone to stop me now. The cracks in Ethan's empire were widening, and it was only a matter of time before the entire structure collapsed. My revenge was no longer a quiet plan in the back of my mind. It had become a full-scale operation. It was the perfect stage for their downfall. I had meticulously arranged every detail to ensure that both Ethan and Emily's humiliation would be as public and devastating as possible. Ethan's company was set to announce a major new business venture at an exclusive gala. The event would be packed with influential figures from the business world, alongside eager members of the press, ready to cover the latest triumph of the great Ethan Caldwell. But they had no idea I had a much bigger story waiting for them. I'd made sure the press would cover more than just his latest venture. At the same time, I had prepared to release all the evidence I had gathered. The photos, the videos, the texts. Everything that would expose Ethan's affair with Emily and his shady business practices. Before the chaos unfolded, I pulled Emily aside for a private confrontation. She had no idea what was coming. When I told her I had known about her affair all along, her face went pale with shock. She couldn't process it, couldn't speak. But I wasn't finished. I looked her in the eyes and told her something else. That I, too, had been unfaithful. That I had been seeing Samantha, Ethan's wife. The look in Emily's eyes was priceless. She had been so consumed with her own betrayal, with Ethan's lies, that she had never even considered I might be playing my own game. "You thought you had me fooled, didn't you?" I said, watching as the realization hit her. "You never even suspected that I might be steps ahead of you." Her expression shifted, and I saw the shame and betrayal wash over her. She was stunned into silence. The moment was perfect. When Ethan finally took the stage at the gala to announce his new venture, the room buzzed with anticipation. He stood there, basking in the spotlight, completely oblivious to the storm about to hit. As he began his speech, I stepped forward, interrupting him. The room went silent as I stood before the crowd, holding up my phone. I connected it to the microphone and displayed the evidence for everyone to see, the photos, the texts, the videos. The shock in the room was palpable as the images flashed across the screen. Gasps echoed through the crowd as the reality of Ethan's affair with Emily unfolded before their eyes. But I wasn't done. I revealed Ethan's shady business dealings, his involvement in underhanded transactions, corruption, and cover-ups designed to prop up the illusion of his success. The press was quick to seize the moment, cameras capturing every detail as the truth came pouring out. Investors murmured among themselves, their trust in Ethan shattering. One by one, they began pulling their funding. The collapse had begun. While the chaos erupted, I sent Samantha a video, a recording that showed exactly how I had used her, exposing her role in the betrayal. I knew the moment she saw it, she would be devastated. She had believed she was part of something real, and now she was caught in the fallout of her own decisions. In the aftermath, the media ran wild with the story. Ethan's once invincible empire crumbled. Investors backed out, colleagues turned on him, and his reputation was left in tatters. The humiliation was complete. He had no choice but to watch helplessly as everything he'd built slipped through his fingers. Emily, still in shock, began piecing together the extent of my manipulation. As she understood what I had done, the guilt hit her hard. She had betrayed me, but I had gone far beyond her. She reached out to me, desperate to repair what was broken, to reclaim what she thought we had lost. But it was too late. I had already taken back control of my life, and I had no intention of rebuilding what was never worth saving. "No, Emily," I said coldly, rejecting her attempts to reconcile. "There's nothing left to fix. You destroyed everything, just like I destroyed you." Her guilt was hers to bear, not mine. She had crossed the line, and so had I. I didn't need her anymore, and I didn't need the life we once shared. Samantha was also reeling, furious and heartbroken. She confronted me, tears streaming down her face as she realized how thoroughly I had used her. She had believed we shared something real, that I cared for her. "You were never anything more than a pawn in my game," I said, my voice cold and detached. Her anger and pain were justified, but it didn't matter anymore. Our relationship had never been real, and once she had served her purpose, she was no longer needed. She became another casualty of my revenge, a chapter in a story I had already finished writing. In the end, Emily and Samantha were left broken, their lives in ruins. As for me, I felt nothing but a strange sense of calm. The revenge I had planned for so long was complete, but there was no triumph in the destruction. The power I had wielded came at too high a cost. Ethan's downfall had opened new doors for me. Thomas, a rival businessman who had been waiting for Ethan to falter, offered me a partnership. He saw my potential, and together we could build something new, something untouched by the wreckage I had left behind. I walked away from the ruins of my past. No more lies, no more manipulation. It was time to rebuild my life, but not with Emily and not with Samantha. This time it would be on my terms. The story was over. As I looked ahead, I knew I could start again, free from the chains of revenge and toxic relationships. The path forward was mine to forge, and mine alone.